100%. Melvin, we are getting to that point where it's time to debunk a little myth.
Yeah,
We talked about this a little bit off air before.
yeah,
So, if I am a parent, right? A lot of times, like, how do you sell a parent on letting a young athlete train? Because I'm sure everybody heard the myth.
yes.
And again, I'm not the professional you are, right?
Mhm.
But from what I hear, there is a myth out there that if young children start training young, it will stunt their growth.
Yes. It's still to this day, it's still a myth that look, it's still a thing that people are worried about.
Because some parents are hesitant to let their kids even start training,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
so, 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 tell me a little bit, like, the myth. Where did it start? How does it affect? When's the good time to, let's say, start letting a child start training,
Mhm.
right? And what kind of training do they have to do? Because the training that I would do with, let's say, somebody who's 11 is not the same for somebody that is like 18, 19, 20-year old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to like, well, if they want to start training, you have to start with the basic, like I said previously. But look, the myth started because I've heard the myth when I did, because I had a podcast during the pandemic, and I've interviewed one of the world-renowned strength coach in the United States, and well, he's world-renowned. So he showed me an article, and the article was saying how um, it started in 1970s in
Hmm.
Japan, when researchers were making a research on like child labor, and
Hmm.
there's no data that's saying like, okay, that it stunts your growth. It came from the child labor, and the way they concluded that all that training stunt their growth is that they just looked at all the children in those factories, and they were saying, well, we saw all these children, and from what we've seen, the denominator is that they're all small, they're all short.
Hmm.
So that's how they concluded, like, okay, that's why if you lift heavy weights, well, it's gonna stunt your growth. But when you look at, I guess, since 2000, you'll see there's a lot of research saying like they do like a 10-week, 12-week program, and then after this they make their research and they conclude that it doesn't affect their it doesn't stunt their growth, but it has actually some positive impacts on their growth.
Hmm. It's so if, let's say, I'm a parent, right? I'm a parent. Um, my kid doesn't have any experience at training. What kind of training is appropriate, let's say, for that age?
Well,
Does
like I
it
said,
does it does it even matter, like, what the age is, like, or is it more like the training age of the person, like how
the training
much they
age
can?
the,
Mhm.
the training age matters, but whenever they come in, well, at first, can you just learn how to lift your own body? That's the first
Mhm.
thing. Before you even add anything, can you hold your own body? And you can just
Mhm.
look, when you sit down, you that it's like squatting, right? Let's say I tell you to
Mhm.
sit down 10 times. It's squatting when you think about it.
Mhm.
So you can do a squat without weight, and
Mhm.
that's a start right there. And
Mhm.
when you think about it, it's like when you play a sport, the impact there's a bigger impact on the kid's body than when you lift. So there shouldn't be as much of a worry when it comes to training, when it comes to like a children, teenager training.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and look, if let's say a parent is not too comfortable, another way to develop your child is to play many sport. Because I
Mhm.
think the biggest mistake that parents are doing with their kids is that they're like, okay, my son, I want my son to only play basketball. Well,
Mhm.
that's being one dimensional. And if you look at all the pros, all the pro athletes, they've started with a sport. They've played many sports. Some of them, they probably
Right.
just played soccer, and then after a while they said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to play basketball. Some play basketball, football, baseball, and other sports. And with with those sports, they cover different type of movements that there aren't in basketball. So that's
Mhm.
right there could be an athletic development for your kid if you don't want them to train yet.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like you said, a lot of these movements are transferable. So I'll give you an example. When I first started coaching,
Mhm.
I coached grade 5 and grade 6, right?
Okay.
So obviously I had some skilled players that could make shots and all that stuff, but my best defender was somebody who played soccer.
Right.
So just them being able to kind of like learn how to anticipate, learn how to get back in front of people, learn
Yeah.
how to cut
Yeah.
off angles and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
They were light years ahead. Just that movement of running back on defense and whatever,
Yeah.
like that was so it's very interesting. So I actually I'm gonna steal one. I have a question for you. Like this is just
Right.
for my general knowledge, and I hope it could help people. So we're kind of in this in an era where everybody's kind of like sitting. We sit a lot. We probably
Mhm.
don't move as much. We're on our phones and all that stuff, right?
Yes.
Um, I've noticed that, and this is because I have a personal training background as well, so I know a
Okay.
little
I didn't
bit of
know.
this. Yeah, yeah. So I noticed that especially in basketball players,
Mhm.
the weakest part or the part that they need to work on the most, a lot of times it's hamstrings, and
Yes. Thank
that
you. You said it
that
right.
causes
Yeah. Go ahead.
that causes it with the knees because like what I
Yes.
noticed is if you notice, like, and we were just talking about these two sports, we're talking about basketball. Basketball is a lot of stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. If your
Yes.
hamstrings are weak, right, you also are more prone to having knee pain because
Yes.
the I don't know what the technical term is, but it's like if you're in a quad dominant sport and your hamstring is weak,
Yeah.
a lot of time what ends up happening is that you end up putting that pressure on your knees. If you look at soccer,
Yeah.
right? If you look at soccer, they rarely have they actually have more hamstring injuries
Yes.
and
So
and
some of
they
them, yeah, they do.
and they don't have ankle sprains because in soccer you could get into a full sprint
Mhm.
more often than in basketball, right?
Yeah, they have more. Yeah, because they're covering more. Yeah. So yeah.
Mm.
So it's fun. It's funny that you said that, and it shows that you have a
I mean,
background in personal
I
training. You did your thing.
I be paying attention, but
No,
yeah,
you
what
pay
you say?
attention. That's good. Shout out to you for real. It's really good. But yeah, yeah, a lot of it's funny because when we have a lot of basketball players that comes in with knee pain, well, what we assess and what we see with most basketball players that comes in, they have weak hamstrings. And the thing they'll be like, okay, well, we at Core Excellence, what we do is that we strengthen the hamstring. We don't stretch them really, unless
Mm.
unless it's they get assessed from they, they get assessed from the athletic therapist that says due to a certain reason they have to stretch it. Most of our athletes don't stretch their hamstring. We put a lot of emphasis on like strengthening the hamstring, which also is gonna help opening up the hips, and it's gonna
Mhm.
make sure that like your quads are less tight also. So that's why, yeah, it's
It
really
releases
important to take.
it releases the pressure off the quads.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because when you think it's like it's the hamstrings are already for most basketball players and athletes that play
Like
in
a high
an
level.
elite level at an
Yeah.
elite level. What we see is that their hamstrings are lengthening for most of them, and it's tight in the front. So you have to strengthen the hamstring and stretch the quads. So that's what you
Mm.
have to do. You have to stretch the quads. So it's
Mm.
not the hamstring that you have to stretch, but yeah, it's like what I always say that hamstrings are like your insurance for your knees.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Ooh-wee. Y'all got this one. Y'all got this one. That's a bar right there.